Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and welcome once again, where we are continuing our look at the continuation novels that John Gardner wrote after Ian Fleming passed away, continuing on the literary adventures of 007. This time we're going to be looking at his third effort that was published in 1983, Icebreaker. A 200-page story in which James Bond searches for the perfect way to relieve the tension at a particularly icy dinner party.
Cards Against Humanity? Anyone?
Okay, no, it's not really that, but instead James Bond is going to fight Nazis in Finland. On to the plot. The story begins with Bond finishing up a training mission in Finland when he calls up a female friend of his called Paula, and presumably Bond has women available for foie gras martinis and rumpy pumpy in every country in the world, so nothing out of the ordinary here. But when he gets to her place, he is attacked and escapes, and then he heads to MI6 the following day. There, M reveals that Bond's training mission was not just a routine, but it was in fact to brace him for Operation Icebreaker, where a team of agents are being dispatched to assist the Soviets in investigating a group located in Finland near the Russian border known as the National Socialist Action Army. This is basically a group of Nazis led by a Count von Gloder, who's positioning the group as the Fourth Reich and himself as the new Führer. The group is arming up, which is obviously causing some concerns for the Soviets, so they call in help from MI6, the CIA, and Mossad in Israel. From the States is Brad Tirpitz, from Russia is Nikolai Moslov, and from Israel is Rivka Ingber. Bond is actually replacing a previous MI6 agent that was a part of the group, but he's no longer a part of that group, and that implies that there's already a lot of tension going on, and M is withholding some of the information, which sets up a little bit of a mystery, and overall I do kind of love this setup. The idea of a group of agents comprised of people from all different various countries, and they're united against a common enemy, and there's some mysteries being dropped in here and there early on, and some of the chapters where the group are meeting up at first, and Bond is kind of second-guessing them all, and everyone's suspecting of each other, and they all think that they each know more than they're letting on and such. I think that's actually quite fantastic. It's a really great setup, and I like a lot of the early chapters of this book, but then things start to fall apart rather quickly. I'm not going to go into every twist and turn that's here, but suffice it to say, there are a lot of twists and turns. It turns out that Bond's regular Finnish shag Paula from the start is actually involved with this whole thing and is one of the Nazis, and Bond of course gets romantically involved with Rivka as the only woman in that team, the Mossad agent, but there's a trap, and then she's injured and kidnapped, and it turns out that she's actually the daughter of the mad Nazi guy, and Bond has to escape some snowplows that come to try and kill him, and there is a lot going on, and it gets a bit tiring, even when you're only halfway through the book. To be honest, I think there was enough potential for just like great conflicts and drama just by virtue of these four people working for the governments that they do and being forced to team up, and I think you could have gotten a lot of great character stuff out of that. I don't think you necessarily needed everyone to have some kind of ulterior motive, and god, everyone in this group does apart from Bond. Things get really silly at the bad guy's base as well. It's called the Ice Palace, and it's adorned with like massive portraits of Hitler and stuff, and it's all very silly, but by this point in the story, I'm totally fine with that. This is sort of coming towards the final third of the book, and as I've said before, I don't expect any of these Gardner stories to reach the height that Ian Fleming did, and so long as I can have some campy fun in here, I'm happy with that. There is a genuinely great torture scene in this one, though, around the point that Bond gets to the Ice Palace, and he's kind of stripped naked, and he's dipped in some ice-cold water, and I know that doesn't sound like a particularly exciting torture sequence, but it's a really great chapter, and probably the highlight of the entire book. To give you more of an indication of how convoluted things get, von Gloder is the main Nazi man, and he's just bad, and stays bad, but then Rivka is his daughter, and starts out good, but then is revealed to be evil. Paula is initially thought to be good, but then bad, and then good again. Brad Tirpitz is good, then he's von Gloder's deputy or something, so he's really bad, but then he's revealed to be good again because he was a triple agent all along, and then there's Moslov, who turns out that he was actually in league with the Nazis all along because Smersh are back, and they want James Bond. They wanted James Bond to be brought into the mission so that they could capture him for revenge against everything that he did in all the Fleming books, and and Russians are just always going to be bad, and that's that, and all of this is just a bit too much. It does get to a point where I just don't really care, and so much time is dedicated to all of these backstabbings and alliance switches that Von Gloder kind of fades into the background somewhat as the main villain of the piece. The idea that Bond is going to fight Nazis in an underground lair is camp, and I want to embrace that, but there's just not enough time to really expand on those elements. The idea that Bond is going to fight Nazis in a massive underground base is really camp, and I just want the story to embrace that, but it never really does, and there's never really enough time to play with those elements in any kind of fun way. So like I say, Paula ends up being good and then helps Bond escape, and they kill Rivka in the process. Moslov is captured but escapes, and then Soviet planes come in and bomb the Ice Palace, but Von Gloder and Brad Tirpitz escape, and everyone heads back to Helsinki, where Moslov tries to kill Bond, but obviously Bond gains the upper hand and then kills Moslov, and then Bond goes to the airport where Von Gloder is escaping, but he kills him, but he gets shot in the process, and then we end the story with him in hospital, and M is there, along with Paula, but that doesn't stop him from pulling the old charm offensive on his nurse, even though Paula's there, and Paula's all like, why don't you just shag me, you fool, and that's how this one ends. So to talk about Bond himself, I don't know if this story does a lot to portray Bond as a terribly good agent in this story. There are so many double crosses and surprises that he doesn't see coming, and there's particularly one bit with Rivka towards the end of the book where she essentially tricks him into revealing some key information, and at that point you're not 100% sure that she's bad, but how this is kind of written, I'm like, oh well, that's weird. Why would she want to know that? She's either bad or someone's listening into this, or Bond is aware of this and he's kind of like feeding her false information or something. I thought it was going to go somewhere because it seemed like such an obvious failure on Bond's part, and no, it just apparently was a failure on Bond's part. Otherwise, he's much the same as he is in the other Gardners. He still has his Saab, and he's still insisting on it being sent around the world with him. No matter where his mission is, he will have an excuse to ship it out. There are some bits with Bond, like observations that he has, that feel like Gardner is making a really conscious attempt to try and bring in some of that Ian Fleming travelogue stuff that he kind of hasn't really in the previous two installments. In the book's acknowledgements, Gardner mentions that he did in fact travel to Finland to do some research for this book, and there are little observations here and there that feel like they're really trying to be Fleming. Like, it feels like Gardner actually had this experience when he was over in Finland, and sometimes it works. I mean, I have a better sense of place here, but some of the things are just really weird. Like, Bond starts talking about how he gets little electric shocks from pressing the lift buttons in a certain hotel, and it's like, alright, okay, I guess when Gardner made his trip there, he was probably pressing the buttons with like rubber gloves in his feet or something. It just stuck out as something like, oh right, okay, when Gardner went there, he had this experience, and so he's giving it to Bond. But overall, to say that I didn't really have a good sense of place in Gardner's first book at all, and the only reason I had a good sense of place in his second one is because he just ripped off the location from a film that I know very well, he does do a good job in Icebreaker of setting the scene, and a lot of that obviously comes through Bond and his own observations. And just finally on Bond, something that is brought up a couple of times and is something that I really liked is, there's a detail in here that Bond is dreaming, and he daydreams about the Casino Royale, and he dreams about it when he's content, and he can tell he's in a good mood when he's having pleasant dreams about that place, even though he only dreams about it years ago, because there is a nice little detail in here that the destination is apparently some kind of tourist trap destination now, and I just thought that was a cute little detail that Bond would have a fondness for that particular location, and in a sense, it sounds like his happy place. There are quite a lot of supporting characters in this one, but for the most part, I think they are kind of just defined by their allegiances, or their double-crossing. I don't know if I necessarily have much of a sense of, who Rivka really is, or Brad, or Moslov, because for so much of the story, they're presenting as something else, and as a result, they're more just kind of tools for the plot than engaging characters. That being said, I found Paula quite interesting, and I was quite surprised that she ended up being as big a part of the plot as she did. Initially, I just liked the idea that Bond was on his way to, one of his many hookups that he has around the globe, and for that to be intercepted by the plot, I thought was quite cool. Of course, then she ends up being a far bigger part of the story than originally anticipated, and all that goes out the window, but still, just as a concept, I like it. The characterization of M kind of took me aback a bit in this one, particularly at the end of the story where he goes to visit Bond in hospital, and he, gives him a pat on the hand and says, "Well done, 007, good job, well done." And it's mentioned, Bond's observation of this is like, that's a bit uncharacteristic, but I think it speaks to a general softening of M and the relationship that Fleming had established between M and Bond in his books. Some of my favourite bits to read in those Fleming books, and I've said this time and time again, are just those briefing scenes between Bond and M. Even if it is just the two of them just bouncing off each other, I think they have great chemistry, and there's a lot going on. The various layers of respect, of admiration, resentment, and so on. And with Gardner, I just feel like that is so much more watered down, which I guess, at this point in the series, Robert Brown was in the role, and there was a general softening of M in the films as well, so maybe he was just kind of taking his lead from that. When it comes to comparing this one with the films, I didn't catch all that many similarities. I mean, obviously we have a villain whose main base of operations is a place known as the Ice Palace, so obviously I'm having flashbacks to Gustav Graves in Die Another Day and the Ice Hotel. Bond teaming up with foreign agents is obviously a recurring plot element throughout several of the films, and I liked Paula at the very start as a kind of Sylvia Trench figure, someone who Bond is very much just, has on call as a random shag. Of course, she becomes more involved in the plot than Sylvia Trench ever did. So as you can tell, I didn't really get all that much out of Icebreaker, and For Special Services still stands as my favourite of the Gardner books, of the ones that I've read so far. I thought that Icebreaker had a really interesting and quite cool setup, but it just kind of flounders as it goes on and thinks that, the more plot twists, the better, and if we have all these plot twists, we don't really need to sort of concern ourselves with writing half-decent characters. I could have easily done with half the amount of plot twists, quite honestly, but it's not the worst Bond book I've read. And on that cheery note, that's it for this time, Bond fans. Please let me know in the comment section below, as always, what your thoughts on this book are. And also, if you okay, so I'm 3 books into this Gardner series. I know that I've got many more to go, and I've not had the greatest of starts, but I will be reading them all eventually. But I was wondering if how you guys would feel about me potentially breaking up this Gardner read-through with reviews of some of the more contemporary Bond books, the like Devil May Care, the Horowitz ones, and so on. So I would probably do maybe 4 or 5 Gardner books, then take a break with one of the newer ones, and then more Gardner, and then maybe a new one, and all that kind of stuff. So please do let me know in the comment section below if that is something that you would like to see, or if you just want to keep me pressing on with this Gardner series. If you really like to see me in pain, basically, is what I want you to say. And also below you can find links to my various social media pages, my Facebook and my Twitter, and my Patreon page as well, if you would like to go one extra step in supporting this channel. Until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.